Greetings and salutations, everyone, and welcome to, depending on wherever you may live or however you choose to read your clock this early morning, middle of the night bonus upload. Before we jump into it, though, couple quick links. As many of you know, I rely on Patreon, PayPal, channel membership, and the merch to help the channel to continue to grow and go. Links to Patreon, PayPal, and channel membership is in the description below. Merch displayed directly under the video. Also, Dogman Frightening Encounters, Volume 1 through 3, the audiobook versions. They were written and researched by Tom Lyons, narrated and produced by me, Jeff Nadolny. Those audiobooks are available on Audible, Amazon, and iTunes, links to which are also in the description as well. And finally, last but definitely not least, if you'd really like to help support the channel to continue to grow and go, simply subscribe. It does not cost you a cent. Click that like button, takes half a second. If you don't want to miss out on any of the informative uploads I put out daily, click that bell icon, and folks, please leave a comment. Why? Well, because all these things really do help this channel to continue to grow and go. They definitely do matter and are appreciated. And now, everyone, I have taken far too much of your time. Let's jump in to this early morning or middle of the night bonus upload, shall we? Today's first encounter. I live in Georgia in a rural town not too far from a major city. There's a set of woods that's behind our house, and it divides two neighborhoods. It's about a mile wide, if that. Strange occurrences have always surrounded these woods. Small things like random trash tarps. I should mention it's more swamp marsh than woods, so it makes camping there impossible. One night I was taking our dog out. He stays in the back half of the house due to him not liking the other dogs. I took him out the side door and walked around the house to the fence. For some reason, when we left the house, he was absolutely terrified. He didn't want to go out, very unusual for a dog who's quick to snatch someone's soul if prompted. Not thinking about it, we pushed onward. After he tinkled, we walked back. This is when I noticed it, or rather heard it. Crunching of leaves. At first, I thought it was one of the dozen cats on the property until I realized it was matching my own footsteps. If I walked, you could hear it walk. If I stopped, it stopped. There's a small clearing between the woods where one of the sheds is. That's when I saw it. My dog was the first to see something, and then I saw some, creature. It was taller than the shed, so maybe a good 8 feet tall, and it darted across the clearing at a crazy speed. My dog, who again is not scared of anything, bolts so fast I dropped the leash. He ran to the door, whining. I was quickly behind him. Once we were inside, I quickly bolted the door and ran to tell my girlfriend what had just happened. She immediately wanted to investigate, saying it's probably just a woodland creature. Armed with 2 flashlights, we went out to the front door. As we walked toward the wood line, we could hear something moving around. It sounded maybe 200 yards away. As we scanned with our flashlights, we saw nothing but kept hearing it. Then we heard it getting closer and closer until it was maybe 20 feet away. Still nothing, no eyes, not even an animal call, just rustling. My girlfriend now heads for the house. I decided to check with our neighbor to see if maybe one of their dogs had gotten out. When I arrived at his house, my neighbor, who we'll call Dave, explained that all of his dogs are accounted for. Curious, he came to investigate. This is when I noticed that whatever this thing was following me along the wood line to Dave's house was now behind Dave's house. Gun in hand, we went out into his backyard scanning for something. We could hear the rustling, or maybe running. About 100 yards away in the thick, swampy woods, way too thick for a person to walk, let alone run in. Then it stopped. It was dead silent. Scanning and on edge, we hear and see nothing, and then bam, all of a sudden it's 5 feet in front of us, sprinting at me. It slammed the fence so hard that it rocked it back and forth. Dave, scared, shot randomly as well. Nothing. We never saw it, never had it got close to us. Again, as I mentioned, the woods are thick, too thick to run in, so What teleported silently in front of us and slammed that gate? Spooked, we were about to run, and then we heard it. It was human in nature, but not English. It sounded alien-like, not a known language. Dave, a hunter for the last 40 years, still to this day cannot explain what it was. Anyway, after we heard it, we bolted. He covered me and I ran into my house. Not 10 minutes later, we were both heard a loud explosion coming from those woods. It shook our houses and flickered the power. I ran outside to see what it was, and of course nothing, but when Dave came out and confirmed he felt the same thing, we both, once again, were terrified. Moments later, a few strangers from the neighborhood came driving down our cul-de-sac. They all agreed that the blast sound they heard came from behind our house. 911 was called, and 2 officers responded. They interviewed us separately. Our stories matched. The responding officers refused to go anywhere near those woods. They took the report and left. To this day, we are still not sure what we encountered. Also, Dave does not go outside at night anymore. It spooked him that bad. The next day, earlier in that day, my mother-in-law, a police officer for a town 40 minutes away, installed 2 motion-activated trail cams along the wood's edge. They were brand new, keep that detail in mind. Thinking maybe we'd see something, we waited for nightfall. Later that evening, I went outside to feed our outdoor cats. That's when I heard it again, rustling, this time not taking any chances. I ran inside and told everyone what I heard. They all piled by the back door and urged me to go out there and look. Reluctantly, I agreed. I took my flashlight and walked to the edge of the woods. Knowing there was a trail cam covering this area, I figured that if it got me, it would at least be on camera and my sacrifice wouldn't be for nothing. As I got to the wood's edge, I could hear it still rustling. I'm shaking at this point because I could tell it was maybe 15 yards in front of me. Everyone at the door was watching me and could hear this thing. Then it got quiet. For a moment it was gone, or so I thought. Just as I'm scanning with my flashlight, trying desperately to see a normal woodland creature so I can laugh this whole thing away, boom! Something fell out of the tree and hit the ground so hard that it shook the soil beneath my foot. It was close, so close that I was sure it was going to lunge out of the brush and snag me. I dropped my flashlight and ran the 100 yards back to the house in what felt like 2 seconds. I screamed, "Get into the house," as everyone was already scampering into the house. They heard and felt the thud as well. My neighbor Dave called my mother-in-law to ask what the loud crash was. For him to have heard it from well over 700 yards away is insane to me. Once the adrenaline died down, we realized that this happened right next to the trail cam. Problem solved. We got evidence of this thing. The next morning, we went to check the SD cards on the trail cams. They had videos up until 11:45. The rest is corrupted. They were both brand new trail cams and SD cards. We reset everything and set them back up. And to this day, we still never encountered the creature again, nor caught anything on camera. Today's second encounter. This is a fairly recent encounter. It happened when I was 18. I'm still 18, so, like I said, fairly recent. This is my encounter with a werewolf in Talladega National Forest. I live in Alabama, and it was a few weeks before my 18th birthday, and being the nature lover I am, my friends Aiden and Maggie invited me to go to the Talladega Forest for an early birthday present, and of course I said yes, with my mom's permission, of course. My friends and I are very outdoorsy people. I met them near a park we always met at for our midday adventures. We hopped in Aiden's truck and began our drive for what seemed like forever. When we got to our campground, everything was normal, people chatting and laughing. We had found our camping space away from all of the other people, since Aiden, Maggie, and I are not the most sociable people. Maggie and I made the tent up since we all had decided to sleep in the same tent. Well, Aiden went to look for some firewood. After the day had gone by, everything seemed normal, so we put out our fire and nodded off. The following morning we had gone for some fishing, but something seemed slightly off. There was no sound, no frogs, nothing. I have high paranoia. Aiden knew this, and him being a jerk decided it would be fun to mess with my paranoia. He told us he would be back and that he was going to get some snacks. We continued fishing, catching very little, just a couple of bream and catfish. Maggie got worried because Aiden had been gone for a couple hours. Leaving me alone, my paranoia started setting in worse. Aiden had jumped out of the brush a few feet away from me, making me shriek. I called him an ass and got up to leave. Maggie caught me walking back to our campsite and asked me what was wrong. I glared at her and nodded my head to where we were fishing, and she laughed. I couldn't help but feel like she was in on it and ran back to the tent. So much for a birthday present. When they got back, the sun had already begun setting. I was playing games on my phone. Aiden apologized for scaring me and tossed me a bag of chips. We cooked and ate what we caught and nodded off. Another remotely normal day. The following morning, when it got weird, we opened our tent to the campsite being destroyed, our pack shredded, and our cooler knocked over with what looked like claw marks all around. I wondered how we could have slept through all of this. Aiden had suggested maybe it was a black bear. Maggie protested that if it were hungry, it would have targeted the tent as well. We shrugged it off and started our hike in the woods that day. There wasn't a trail that we were on that there was no sound, nothing, not even a bird. Maggie suddenly gasped and started walking away quickly. Aiden looked over, trying to shield me from what Maggie had seen. I pushed him aside and froze. It was a freshly killed deer. It had gashes on its neck and its stomach was torn open. Aiden pulled me away and we started heading back to camp. I'd been silent the whole time, Aiden holding my wrist, knowing how much shock I was in. I finally shuddered out. That poor deer, what the hell could have done that? And why did it just leave it like that? Maggie looked back and suggested bear. Quickly, Aiden denied. Bears don't leave a meal like that. We got back to the campsite, and for the rest of the day I sat in the tent puzzled and sick. Maggie and Aiden were arguing outside for hours about what we had seen. They returned to the tent looking at me while I was still in shock. Aiden suggested that we go to sleep. I didn't sleep. I just sat up in my sleeping bag listening to the sounds, but there were none. Not even the wind. Suddenly, a loud howl broke the silence. It shook me. I held my breath listening, and again, but louder and more, angry howl. I could hear walking in the woods around us. Aiden touched my shoulder, and I jumped, and he shushed me. He was looking at the side of the tent, and I noticed what he was looking at. A shadow that I could only describe as Professor Lupine's movement in Harry Potter. We peeked out of the tent flap a little, and we saw it. A massive, black, wolf-like creature. Not too far from our tent. Maggie woke up and asked loudly, "What the hell are you doing, making so much noise?" Aiden quickly grabbed her mouth, but it was too late. This werewolf dogman thing was making its way towards our tent. We could now hear it barreling through the woods, and we couldn't get away, so Aiden grabbed his pistol, which he had stolen from his dad. I didn't question it at the time, since it was our only means of protection we had besides my hunting knife. He stood outside the tent and fired a warning shot. It stunned the creature. The creature seemed to not know what had just happened. Aiden yelled, trying to either scare this creature or I don't know. It let out a deep guttural growl as it stood on its hind legs, towering over Aiden, which scared us even more. Aiden's easily 6'2" and not a small guy. He yelled at us to run for his truck while it was focused on him. We did as he said, but I kept looking back, watching him try to scare this beautiful creature. It wasn't long before we heard another shot and a loud, pained howl. Maggie and I assumed that Aiden had shot the creature. We heard something running through the forest and prepared for the worst. Aiden busted out of the woods and yelled, "Get in the truck!" We piled into his truck, crying that we were going to die. Aiden's truck wouldn't start, which worried us. Maggie screamed, and we looked to where she was looking. This creature's face was pressed against the side window, its amber eyes piercing through our souls, as it seemed. Its breathing fogged the window. I yelled, I yelled at Aiden that all he did was make it even more mad by shooting it. He glared at me, grumbling that it was not time to be all animal loving. This creature banged its hands on the truck window, going around the truck trying to find a way in. Finally, the truck started. Aiden floored it, scaring this creature. Maggie's still freaking out, watching behind us, yelling, "Drive faster!" The creature was chasing us. Aiden sped up, and I turned to get one more look. I was amazed that this was happening to me, but at the same time I was terrified that it was happening to me. The drive home was long and tiring. We didn't speak about it anymore. Up until a few weeks ago, when I suggested maybe we should share this, Aiden encouraged me. Maggie protested that nobody would believe us and they'd think we were crazy. So that's my and my friend's encounter with the Talladega Dogman. Tonight's third encounter. I live in Chattanooga, Tennessee, just a few minutes away from Harrison Bay. The year I started with 4 cats, and I would let them roam outside, and they would always come back when it got dark. One of them didn't come back one day. I didn't think too much other than it just wanted to stay out longer, and I'd let him in the first thing in the morning. After a week of no sign of him, I gave up hope, and I thought maybe a stray dog or a wild animal or something got her. I kept a closer eye on the cats from then on, but didn't have any problems until a couple of months later when another one disappeared. Now I only let one single cat out who is older and meaner and can protect himself, and even then he comes back before it gets dark if he goes out at all. Now, the beginning of the encounter happened December 28th, 2018. I was driving home from work, and the closer I got to my house, the thicker this strange misty fog became. I went inside after feeling a little uneasy, went to bed after making sure both the cats were inside and accounted for. I woke up at around 3 a.m. to sounds of a cat making an awful wailing noise outside of my front door. It sounded almost like a siren from how it rose and fell in pitch. I looked to make sure the cats were okay. They were huddled under my TV stand, looking terrified at the front door where the wailing was coming from. I listened closer to the wailing sound. It was off. It sounded like a wail on the surface, but a guttural growl undertone. I felt a strong urge to open the door, but then I had a feeling tell me not to open it. I smacked the door instead, and this thing made a loud, garbling, wailing growl sound and scampered away. I then went to lie back down. At around 3:30 at this point, it started back up outside of my bedroom window. At this point, this time, however, it would wail and then make a sound like it was fighting another cat, but there was only one creature making that noise. At around 4 a.m., it came to a stop. When I went outside in the morning to go to work, there was white fluff all over the ground. Today's fourth encounter. This happened to me in July. Just to give you some context of where I was to discount any of the possible wildlife explanations. At the time, I lived in the Midwest in a suburban area, fairly populated and near a very populated city. There is nowhere that would be considered rural within at least 40-mile radius. Anyway, to start the experience, it was late at night. I was hanging out with my golden retriever Leo, who had just turned 1 year old a couple of weeks prior. I was watching YouTube in my room while he lay on the floor next to me. It was around 12:30 in the morning, and I was getting ready for bed, so I had to take him out before we both went to sleep. So I got the leash on him, and we went out. My family and I lived in a large apartment complex. The apartments have quite a few rooms and their own personal garage, but still have 8 to 10 apartments per building. So the buildings are very long and slim. Behind our building was a long strip of grass that goes out about 15 feet, then a large tree line that is 20 feet deep and about 200 feet long. Leo and I go out front around the building to the back, as we don't have an exit to the back. We're on the second floor, and we all have our own separate entrances. We make our way to the back to the grassy area, and I walk out into the grass with him to let him do his business. I'm on my phone, not paying any attention really, and we stand there for a good minute. I realize it's been a good amount of time, and I notice Leo has not moved one bit. I turned off my phone and looked at him and realized he hadn't moved from that spot we had stopped at and was looking at the other building right by the woods. He had been frozen this whole time. I pet him and he looked up at me, and when I stopped petting him, he looked straight back to the same spot. I hadn't at the time realized he was looking at a spot that whole time until then, and I looked over to where he was looking at. My eyes were not adjusted to the darkness. I could only see a shadow of the building. The only source of light was streetlights about 50 feet behind us. I looked back at him and quietly chuckled because I thought he had heard a squirrel and was all perked up. It was very cute, and then I looked back at my phone. Leo, in the corner of my eye about 15 seconds later, flinched back as he had been startled by something and started to whine. I looked back over to the spot this time, realizing now he was scared of something he saw while we had been out here. My eyes were now adjusted to the darkness. I saw what he was fixated on. In the shadow of the building right next to the corner wall, in front of the tree line, about 15 feet away from me, was that creature. I could only see a black outline as it was not lit up enough, but it was massive. I know how tall the building is relative to me. When it was standing right next to the building, it was about 5 feet tall. That wouldn't be very tall if it were standing up, right? But this thing was on all fours. The best way I can describe how it looked is when a bulldog snarls and kind of flexes its front legs trying to intimidate something, but was scaled up to about 5 feet tall and way more muscles. Its outline was much wider. There is no way that this was any creature in the Midwest. The only creature that is remotely close to that is a black bear, which is all the way up north, nowhere near where I am. I'm in the southeastern part of my state. There are no wooded areas for a bear to live in anyways, as I stated in the beginning. Plus, the max height of a black bear on all fours would be about 3 feet, and not very broad. This thing surpassed that by a long shot, and was very broad. I jumped back in fear, and was just frozen after that for a solid 30 seconds, just staring at it. I then backed away slowly, keeping my eye on it the whole time. Leo began to growl and snarl at it as we rounded the corner. Leo has never acted aggressive like that before, so this really freaked me out even more. I then peeked around the corner, no more than a second later, and it was gone. No noise, no shadow swiftly moving behind the building, just gone. There's no way something could have moved behind the building that fast without a sound, especially of that size. This freaked me out even more, and I sprinted back inside of our house. I would really like to think that I just hallucinated this thing and I was tired, but it was clear as day, even during the night, right? I've never shared this experience with anybody, but it still freaks me out to this day. Tonight's fifth encounter. Around 8 years ago, me and some friends used to spend our weekends spelunking and exploring abandoned places at night. We didn't vandalize or anything. We would just go and take cool pictures and spook each other out. There's an old abandoned rock quarry in our county that lots of teenagers go and throw parties and get drunk. I had never been down there before, but my friends had been, as they were a few years older than me and had partied down there before. There's a huge hill where you have to park your vehicle at the top of and cross a gate and walk down the hill to reach the quarry. There's a huge pile of rocks in the middle of the land outside of the actual quarry cave. Lots of old equipment and broken down bulldozers. We ventured into the quarry cave, probably 200 feet in, took some pictures and went back outside. There was standing water inside, and we wanted to be as safe as possible, not knowing how sturdy the ceiling was or how deep the water was. Coming outside, we kept hearing some really strange animal-like noises. We live in rural Kentucky, so we see bobcats, mountain lions, and bear a lot, but usually deep within the woods, which we weren't at the time. We usually always carried a machete for tearing weeds down and just for a safety precaution in general. Anyway, standing outside of the quarry cave, we were hearing this weird growling, and not like a bear or a dog, not like anything we had ever heard before. We had flashlights and we shined them around, looking on the hill surrounding us, and found these huge reddish eyes staring at us. We all looked at each other like, WTF is that? Whatever it was standing there was at least 9 feet tall, standing like a human, not like a bear would. It was massive. We could see fur, and its head was massive. Its eyes were a good foot apart. We kept standing there looking at it, honestly in shock. We started walking fast up the hill, and it was following us along the hill line. We finally made it to the gate and turned around, and it was standing around 30 feet away from us. What we saw was no bear. I've seen black bear around my house plenty of times. We still talk about it to this day. We have no idea what it was. We looked up information on descriptions other people have had, and ours sound very similar to what people say is a dogman, especially the eyes. I've had plenty of paranormal experiences, and I really enjoy sharing them with people that have had similar experiences. Tonight's last encounter is a subscriber submission. On the 4th of July, 2016, 2 girlfriends and myself decided to raft down the Chattahoochee River and spend some time at the Diving Rock and laugh at all the drunks enjoying their holiday. This is in North Georgia summer tradition going way back to the 60s. I'm 47 now, but in my youth I did it quite a few times and damn near killed myself doing a gainer off the Diving Rock when I landed on my belly, inhaled water somehow, and nearly drowned. I was fairly drunk and don't remember how I made it back to the surface, but my upper body was purple the next day, and my internal organs hurt for weeks. The river was way down that year, maybe 1988, so that made the big flat rock at least 25 feet off the river. Most people chickened out once they got up there. Anyway, after 28 years at least, we were back, and now sober. I haven't drank alcohol in 10 years. I had to answer the call of nature, so I walked pretty far back into the dense woods because of the people, at least 15 or so, waiting to jump. Having nothing but my bathing suit, I walked much further so I could try and find something akin to a toilet tissue. Finally, after reaching a small clearing surrounding by old growth pines, I do my business. As I'm squatting there in a very vulnerable position, out walks in broad daylight an enormous canine-type creature. I spent 21 years in the military, all over the world in 3 different theaters of war, and I have never even heard of this creature before. In the 3 days since, I barely slept at all, researching everything in a zombified state. I can still taste the fear in my throat and my own vomit. I am 6 feet tall, 250 pounds, and this thing dwarfed me. At least 7'6", maybe 350 to 400 pounds. As a former college and semi-pro football player and power lifter, I know about big people and about strength and musculature. And this was no normal creature that evolved somehow in that environment. This is some kind of genetically mixed entity of man, wolf, and primate. My encounter with it lasted minutes. It displayed a very bizarre behavior and vocalized several times at me. It stunk so bad and horrified me so badly that I retched again and again. I was gone so long that the girls came looking for me, and they are what finally scared this creature off. When they found me, I was trembling and couldn't speak. As a combat lifesaver in the military, I can tell you for certain that I was in shock from this. Every joint in my body and my ab muscles are still hurting after 3 days. So, I will be more than willing to share everything with you in hopes that I can relieve my anxiety somewhat by just expressing my trauma because I am not sure what type I saw, but I can promise you that this is not something that anyone would want to encounter twice. I am not grateful, I don't feel privileged, and I will not chase after this thing with a camera. Jeff, thanks for providing a forum for us experiencers to share. I needed this.
And there you have it, folks. I do hope you all enjoyed today's bonus as much as I enjoyed sharing it with you. And I'd like to thank you all for supporting the channel. It is, after all, your support that keeps the channel growing and going, and what gives us all a place and a chance to share our experiences and theories judgment-free. Everyone is treated with the respect that we deserve. That is because of all of you. Thank you. Stay safe, happy, healthy, and ever vigilant, keeping an eye on our children, pets, family, and friends. These creatures are real. They are out there and dangerous. Share this information with those you love and care about, and it may just help save their lives someday. Until next time, never stop asking questions, never stop searching for the truth, and God bless you all.